Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Garibaldi Red, a Nottingham Forest podcast. I'm Max Sayes, your host, as Forest beat Ipswich at the City Ground thanks to a brilliant Chris Wood penalty. Forest win the game at 1-0, and if that doesn't show a penalty from a striker in form, then what was? We will discuss the game, all of that surrounding, and we're also going to touch on the Forest women as well. Their fantastic result on Sunday. We'll look ahead to two of the games in Manchester, getting some home fixtures for me at once, so I certainly won't be leaving early, Mark. We'll talk about the City game on Wednesday night and, of course, the trip to Old Trafford on Saturday, and we'll discuss lots more as well. Joined, first of all, by Holly Royal from the Forest Women podcast. Just recently set up, Holly. You've done podcasts before and stuff. You've obviously been a lifelong Forest fan, so nice to have you on. Nice to make your debut on Garibaldi Red. How are you? How's things?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. Thank you very much for having me on. This man below gave me my debut on a podcast, so big thanks to Mark. we did some bits, didn't we, with the Forest Women for the US Fancast about 3 or 4 years ago, wasn't it? So yeah. Big thanks to Mark. Yeah, great, mate. Enjoying it. Really relieved after Saturday. And the women did fantastically well yesterday, as you probably saw, 19-0 away at Long Itchington. So yeah, all good.
19-0. Cool.
I know.
It's nuts. We will get onto that towards the kind of tail end of the podcast. Mark, good to have you with us as well, mate. Thanks as always. I know I like to message you at random times of the day and say, are you free to do a podcast or fill in for someone last minute? So thanks, mate. Not saying that you're like my subs backup bench. Just keep digging the hole, Max. How are you? You okay?
Well, I'm not quite sure how to respond to that, but let's just gloss over it and move on.
Yes.
Ever at your disposal, Max, and yeah, it's great to see you, Holly. I am curious, in the women's game, when they got to 10-0, do they have the mercy rule where you have to take a player off, play a man down?
You know what, we were saying that. It's like, should we sub on our goalkeeper for their goalkeeper? Although their goalkeeper did really, really well, actually, considering it was 19. She actually did all right, bless her. But she was absolutely covered in mud by the end of it. But yeah. No, it felt a little bit cruel when it got to about 17.
It does
like,
when it gets
stop now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's good to see you again, like I said, and it's great to have you on this podcast. It's been a while since you and I have been on a pod together, so I'm excited to talk about the men's victory, Max, as well as the women's impressive season so far.
Yes, absolutely. Right, let's kick things off, shall we? And we'll start with you, Holly, actually. What did you've said you saw the game back as well. What did you make to the game, the Chris Wood penalty, everything surrounding it? Because kind of watching, I thought Forest didn't play maybe the best performance all season. It's always going to be difficult, right? I think Ipswich, we were just saying before we started recording this and coming on air, that Ipswich reminded us a little bit of maybe Forest in that first season. They're going to come to, albeit an established Premier League side, and not sit back, but that kind of low block make it quite difficult to break down. And it was that, and Forest did struggle for large parts of the game, but they get 3 points, and that's all that matters, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I just after relief, really, after those two losses at Newcastle and obviously at Arsenal. Sounded like a really scrappy game where we had to keep our heads, get the basics right, backs against the wall at the end by the sounds of it, just to get those 3 points. But when you've got Chris Wood that's absolutely, like you say, flowing with confidence, he's matured into a real vintage for us, hasn't he? And what a well-taken penalty. I mean, I said to you before we started that they probably could still hear that back of the ball in the back of the net in the city centre. It was it was a lovely pen. So yeah, delighted. I mean, I was really worried before this game because I thought they'd come off the back of a really decent point against Man U, playing some good stuff, and we had those two losses, so it would have I think, had we not won on Saturday, I was slightly fearful considering our next few fixtures. So yeah, just really, really pleased, relieved we've got it. Gibbs, White, Anderson back, got the job done. Defence looked really solid. Yeah, really happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Spot on. Agree. We are live on YouTube, Garibaldi Red, and Facebook, Nottingham Forest News. So let us know your thoughts on the game. Good to have your company as always. Mark, it was kind of interesting, wasn't it? Because I can remember talking on the podcast last week and actually talking to Dave about this, and he said maybe it was a must-win for Forest because you've conceded 6 goals in 2 games. It is a bit of a blip, Forest recovered from that blip very well with given the result, but there is that sense of anxiety when you go into the game, and maybe it wasn't a must-win, but just more, as Holly said, a relief to get 3 points. And then you look at the table again after, all right, not the best performance, we've got 3 points, and Forest is 6th. That's just nuts going into the start of December.
It is. It's crazy, yeah. And we're 1 point off of third or fourth, and 1 win off second. It is a bit crazy to be in the heady heights of 6th, but that's what this team deserves this season, based on performances, based on results. And I would say that this weekend's game was a must-win, Max, when we're talking about results, because I think anything less than a victory, and I think we really would have been disappointed. We would have been having, sort of Bournemouth and Fulham vibes. It's these are Wolves vibes. These are games that we should be winning, especially at home. And I think it's reflective of how far we've come in the last 3 years, that you have a team like Ipswich that's a good football team. They're not pulling up any trees, but they've got some good players, and they've certainly got a good manager who's got them well organised, and they've played some good football this year. So for them to rock up to the City Ground thinking that we need to be in a low block, we need to try and absorb pressure, we're not really going to push higher until later in the game, hopefully we're still in it. Like, for them to come with that mentality, I think speaks volumes for how far we've come as a team. But I also think that was the biggest challenge for us at the weekend, Max, is we're such an effective counter-attacking team. Ipswich, certainly in the first half, didn't give us the space to do that. We weren't moving the ball laterally with any pace. And so once we got into the final third, things just slowed down. And there was certainly ambition there. There was creativity. It was good to see Morgan Gibbs-White back, but there wasn't enough of it to unlock that defence in the first half and even in the second. I mean, you alluded to the fact it wasn't Forest's best performance of the season, but I think you have to give Ipswich kudos for that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Holly, why do you think Forest almost struggled to break down Ipswich? Was it them setting up and being quite low block? Was it a bit of a confidence thing maybe from the players still carrying over that, we've conceded 6 goals? Or was it just simply, sometimes that's life, that's football, and you eventually get not a scrappy goal, but you eventually just get one chance to put the ball in the back of the net with a penalty, and Chris Wood does that.
Yeah, I think they were just set up to kind of frustrate us, weren't they? They had a clear game plan and they executed it pretty well, to be honest. And, I think they would have bitten your hand off for a point at the City Ground, possibly more. I mean, no, I can understand where they were coming from. And I think we were also, you kind of sense that we have that a little bit tentative at times at home now, because we've kind of got that monkey on our back about just sort of not quite being there at home this year. Obviously coming off the back of the loss at home to Newcastle. But I'm pleased. I mean, it doesn't sound like it was a particularly great game of football, but yeah, like we say, we got the job done, and that's all that matters at the end of the day. We've got the 3 points, and we're still 6th in the Premier League, which is absolutely mad when you think about it. Think about to this time last year, it's crazy. So yeah, we're still going to enjoy it for what it is, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I was saying to a mate today, actually, he said, do you think Forest can actually maybe finish in that top half of the table and even pushing towards the Europa Conference and all of that? And I said, well, let's see where we are at Christmas. I said, let's see where we are in December. And he was like, oh yeah, well, Christmas is only a couple of weeks away. And I was like, oh, that's a very good point, actually. 2nd of December and Forest are 6th, which is crazy to say, and we keep talking about it. Let's talk
Max, can I just want to quickly jump in there, because it just occurred to me as Holly was speaking that I'm struggling to think of too many teams who have been in the fortunate position we're in are falling in love with 2 managers back to back. I mean, it took us a little while to warm up to Nuno. We weren't quite sure of this last season, but we've gone from having this love affair with Coops to, I think Nuno is the dog's you-know-what, quite frankly. I think what he's been able to do with this team and the way that he's molded it, not just in terms of personnel, but in terms of approach as well, has been remarkable. And it's been different from Cooper. It's not been Cooper V2. It's been a different way to do it. Maybe you could argue more the Forest way of playing football than perhaps Cooper, gave us the last couple of seasons in the Premier League, certainly in the Championship. We were swashbuckling under him. But, Brighton, I could think of, are a club where they just seem to go from back-to-back managers that they're in love with. But there aren't too many others, right? Usually when you lose a manager who's popular, the next one who comes in, he's sort of the rebound. It doesn't tend to last very long before your next true love comes around. So to have Nuno coming off the back of Coops and establish himself so well, I think is pretty awesome.
Only you, Mark, could make analogies about dating on this podcast. Speak for yourself, mate.
You've got to have a girlfriend first, Max, before you get a
true,
remarriage.
actually, that's a good point. Right, let's talk team news and team selection.
Oh, I've embarrassed him now.
Yeah, I've got it all red now. Let's talk team selection. Forest made a few changes, and Jota Silva coming into the starting 11, which we've not cried out for. I don't mean that.
You certainly have.
Yeah, I have.
Let's start backpedaling.
But you know, I've been desperate to see Jota because you think he offers something really, really different to the team. I almost look as red as this logo. I think he offers something different to the team, Mark. And yeah, I think obviously we've discussed it for ages, but he makes that decision. Nuno, he gives faith to Jota, and Jota does. I thought incredibly well. And when he came off, you noticed Forrest missed his creativity a lot. Do you think?
Well, I'm going to throw it over to Holly because people are probably sick and tired of hearing us wax lyrical about Jota. So everyone knows my opinion on him. The only thing I will ask of the both of you before we throw it to Holly is, was it a penalty or not?
Yeah, I thought it was a penalty. And I had this conversation with an Ipswich fan that I stumbled across on at 6:06 before putting him on air on the show, and he said, "Oh, I think it was quite harsh." And I thought, well, maybe it is. And then I looked back at it and I thought, no, I think it was definitely a penalty. And if that was against, if it was given the other way, I'd have said the same. Don't know about you, Holly.
Yeah, there was definitely contact on his toe, wasn't there? It's kind of...
He stood on his foot. I think what didn't help it is the way that Jota then sprung up like a cat who just stepped onto a hot plate. Do you know what I mean? It was like, oh. Had he not done that, it was a little theatrical, but it looked like he definitely got, as we say in America, cleats, studs on the top of his foot, right?
Mm.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, he did make a bit of a meal of it, but then why not? You know, he's going to get the penalty, isn't he? So, yeah, I would say it was a penalty for me, definitely.
So what are your thoughts on Jota overall and him starting?
No, I was really pleased, really, really pleased. I mean, he's still a rough diamond, isn't he? But he's so full of enthusiasm. He was obviously itching to start, wasn't he, as well? And my thoughts on Elanga, you know, he's done well this season, but there's just no consistency there, is there? It's kind of all pace and just not a lot of end product for me. So, and was he still carrying a slight injury as well? I think, wasn't he, from Arsenal?
I think they all are, aren't they?
Yeah.
Just about everybody is.
Oh, yeah. Have an excuse. No, I was delighted to see him start. Not quite the debut, the first starting performance that we were after, but as I say, I think there's loads more to come from him. I think he's a really exciting player, and he's just a bundle of energy, isn't he? And once it really clicks for him, and he gets some consistent run in the team, I think we'll see the best of Jota for sure. So I was pleased.
Absolutely. Mark agrees with you as well. Hudson-Odoi didn't have his best game against Ipswich, and Elanga gone off the boil, but Jota Silva, breath of fresh air. Harold says, greetings from South Germany. Yes, indeed, Harold. Greetings. And also, we'll get onto a few more things off the pitch for Forest, but highly recommend you go and kind of check out the Forest timeline, because there's some good stuff on there at the minute on social media. We're a club that can often dominate the headlines for the wrong reasons, but there was another little special moment this afternoon. There's many more this weekend, but a special moment this afternoon with Marinakis with Warriors United, which is lovely to see. And yeah, obviously we saw the press with Nuno, but there's a nice little feature there on Forest social. So do go and check that out. It shows how far we've come as a club. It's interesting, actually, Mark, that comment from the other Mark that says about Hudson-Odoi not having his best game and Elanga maybe going off the boil. Do you agree with that? I think definitely I kind of agree with the Elanga point. I thought he had a really poor game, if I'm perfectly honest. You know, we obviously came on late on. But Hudson-Odoi and Elanga, the two players that we often wax lyrical about and talk about so much, but they do seem to be struggling recently, or is that maybe me being a little bit too harsh?
No, I think it's just them being human beings. I think that you can count on the fingers of one hand, have fingers to spare, how many players in the Premier League go from first whistle to final whistle and don't have a tough game. Maybe Cole Palmer. I mean, maybe Mo Salah in terms of output. Like, he has bad games. Liverpool fans will say, you know, he's invisible for 85 minutes and pops up and scores a winner. You take that all day long, wouldn't you? But there aren't very many players who don't hit the skids at some point during the season. Also bearing in mind as well, you know, we've talked a lot, Max, in the last few episodes about fatigue, right? And about really utilising what is a good squad, giving Jota an opportunity to get out there, JWP, Sosa, those lads on the fringes champing at the bit to get in there. Callum Hudson-Odoi and Alanga have played a lot of minutes together. And to Holly's point, yes, Alanga is a speed merchant. We know those players that tend to be quicker have a tendency to get pulls and niggles and whatnot. So who's to say he isn't playing with something? It feels like everybody is right now. So I think it all goes in the mix. And I think, again, they're just human beings. They're subject to having a few good games, having a down game, getting in their own heads. The one thing that did concern me about Jota starting was how that would affect the dynamic that clearly has developed between Callum Hudson-Odoi, Alanga, and MG Dub, right? Because they're obviously a tight trio. And I thought, wow, I wonder if we're going to see that sort of show up in a negative way in the match. I don't think we did, although I think we did favour playing the ball out to Callum's wing over Jota's wing. And that could just be tactics. That could have just been circumstance. I hope it's nothing more than that. I don't want to read stuff in, to a situation that wasn't there. But in terms of Alanga and Callum Hudson-Odoi, we know what they can do. And giving them maybe a game or two on the sidelines mightn't be the worst thing in the world. But, we're not throwing their baby out with the bathwater. They're both really good players and still delighted to have them in Garibaldi.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. And I think that you're right, actually. It's a really good point, Mark, to counteract my question is about they are human beings, and you forget that Forest players and just general football players, they're playing a lot of minutes at the minute. And
yes, it's not FIFA.
Yeah, well,
I think we have that tendency, don't we? It's like, I put my best team out. Why didn't we spank them? Oh, because
my FIFA ability's never been great. I can remember. In fact, I started a career mode with Crew Alexandra, and
well, there's your problem right away.
Well, to be fair, I'm covering Crew a little bit at the minute, so I thought I need to kind of get some knowledge up about the players. So I'll start a career mode, and I've lost like 3 in a row. I've probably been sacked. I haven't been on it in ages. Anyway, enough about FIFA. Holly, when you look at Callum Hudson-Odoi and Anthony Alanga, you can understand the criticism, but then in the same way, you think, as Mark was just saying, they are human beings, but also you forget that maybe we rely on them a little bit too much. The same way with Morgan, you almost notice when your star players have had a bad game because they normally run the show, and whereas other players, perhaps your Morgan Gibbs-Whites, your Callum Hudson-Odoi, your Anthony Langas, make up for other players' mistakes. If that question makes sense.
Yeah, I think especially for someone like Callum, who scored that wonderful goal against Liverpool, which is probably one of our highest points we've reached in recent times. So he's always it kind of feels that he's kind of got to reach those same kind of levels. And he's kind of averaging out at the moment. He's had a few under par games, but that doesn't mean that he's a terrible player. I think the only criticism I would have really is that it does seem like he's a bit of a one-trick pony with his cut inside. Everyone knows what he's going to do. And maybe he needs to get a little bit more dynamic. Maybe he needs to track back a little bit more. Maybe he needs to get involved a little bit more. But I still love the guy. I think he's an absolute quality player. And I think he'll still deliver for Forest as long as he's on the pitch. Maybe Saturday wasn't particularly one of his good games, but, I'd still start him personally. I think he's got absolutely loads to give, and he can switch a game in a moment, can't he? So yeah, I'm a big fan of Callum.
I've got to jump in there, Max, quickly off the back of Holly's comment about tracking back. So we were having a conversation on WhatsApp with the US lot, and somebody said Callum looks a little bit out of sorts, so maybe it's because he's playing with a different fullback, and he's being asked to do things and track back and whatnot. I'm like, he's not Mbappe. It's not beyond the pale to suggest he has to track back or fill in, or do you know what I mean? It's like, it's particularly when you're not giving anything at the other end. And my counter to that was, he's not having a good day. Like his touch was off, his decision making was off. They were doubling up on him. Well, okay, well then again, you hit that lateral pass, or you move the ball through the middle more quickly and you play it out the other side. And none of that was happening. And that's okay. Like, we didn't solve the problem on the spot. You want to see players do that. It didn't happen on this occasion. But if things aren't working out for you offensively, then again, you should be expected to hustle back. You should be expected to get behind the ball and do the other side of the game as well.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Talking about fullbacks and a bit of a change, obviously in the starting lineup there with Nico Williams coming in. What did you make to that, Holly? I don't mean this is in a negative way to Nico, because I thought he had a good game, but I was just a bit surprised to see that change.
Yeah, same. Really, really surprised. I mean, he had a good end to the season, didn't he, last season? And I quite like the idea of him being on free kicks, although obviously they didn't quite come off on Saturday. But I think he takes them for Wales, doesn't he? But I don't know. I love Nico. I do. I think he's an absolute workhorse. You know, he works his socks off, but he would never be my first choice, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree. I was just about to come in and say that, and it's the same with. I think with Nico. I don't want to compare the two, but someone like, I don't know, because obviously he doesn't feature, but Harry Toffolo, they're great players, and if you ask them to do a job, they'll try and do it to the best of their ability. And I mean, I really don't want to come across like condescending here to professional footballers. However, I just think you're right. Nico maybe isn't our best option in that position. Do you agree there, Mark?
You've given us a lot to unpick there. First and foremost, a condescension. I'm not quite sure where to go with that, but I'm going to let you off on that one. And then the suggestion that Nico Williams and Harry Toffolo are in the same category.
I kind of mean that. Hear me out. I kind of mean that in terms of I think Harry Toffolo, if you brought Harry Toffolo into this Forest starting 11 for injuries now, you'd see the effort, you'd see the determination and that almost pride to wear the Forest shirt. And I'm not saying you don't see that from others, but you see it with Nico Williams. Okay, they might not be the best footballers, but they give 110% effort every single game. That's what I kind of mean in comparing the two.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, I think to Holly's point, you know, if I were to pick my Forest starting 11 now, I'd have Aina and Moreno in there every day of the week and twice on Sundays. I just think Moreno's a better rounded player, like an all-round player. You can just see his quality. There's just levels, right? But I don't think Nico's a million miles away from that, certainly offensively. Defensively, he can be a little suspect at times. Positionally, not always in the best of shape, but yeah, I don't think there's a lot between them. That's my take. You kind of caught me off guard with that one because I wasn't expecting to get in the weeds on Nico Williams, but and I love him. Like I said to you, he was one of my favourite players this last season. Again, exactly to Holly's point, because he worked his ass off and he had a great end to the season. He was one of our most productive players. So
yeah, absolutely. I think he's a good person to have around the dressing room as well. I think when you watch the behind the scenes videos as well, he's very much involved with the squad. Given that he doesn't start that much, he's not a regular starter. However, he's a big name around the dressing room, and he'll be good with the younger players as well. Talking of more players, we've got to touch on it. Morgan Gibbs-White and Elliot Anderson coming back into the starting 11. Saw some, not criticism, but questions asked by Forest fans on social media after about whether playing in Anderson in a different role would work. Mark puts his head in his hands there. So in fact, no, we'll go to Holly because I get a bit sick of Mark. Holly, obviously, obviously great to have. I'm sure the feeling's mutual, mate. Great to have Elliot Anderson and Morgan Gibbs-White back. Just their creativity, energy, everything, and you can just tell when Forest missed them, which we did the last couple of games.
Oh yeah, there was a gaping hole against Arsenal, wasn't there? It was so clear. We had like zero creativity in midfield. I mean, we had an off day anyway, but I think just what they bring, especially MGW, what he brings to that team, he's just like that nucleus, isn't he, that we just work around. And I think he's a massive gap psychologically as well when he's not there for the rest of the team. He just, he's just a fantastic guy, fantastic player. And I'm interested to know what you, because I'll be honest, I hadn't watched the last few episodes of Garibaldi Red where you guys may have discussed this, but whether you're pro having them both on the pitch, and how do they fit in? How do we put that piece of the jigsaw together, or whether you're one or the other, Mark? Because I'm very much having them both on the pitch. Quite where they sit, I haven't completely decided, but I thought they worked well from what I could tell on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm 100%. Like I see what value Dominguez brings to the team. I rate him. I don't think I'm ready to throw Sangare to the wolves. I'm excited for him to come back, and likewise Danilo. But Elliot Anderson is fast becoming my favourite Forest player, in part because he wears my number, in part because he plays my position, but mostly because he is just such a good footballer. You watch his touches and the way he cuts and the way he can come out of both sides, and he's just got great balance and vision. And no, he doesn't have the flair and the razzmatazz that you get with MG Dub, but I just think he's such a... I'm always a fan of those players who just kind of go under the radar, right? The John McGoverns of this world who just do a shift and get it done, and an 8 out of 10 every match. And occasionally you get a 9 out of 10, and every now and then you might get a 7. But generally speaking, they just hum along as an 8. And I love having Anderson in there. And I don't think it's difficult to get them in there. I mean, I think they're all smart enough that they can move around. They can be, fluidity in there. But generally speaking, Yates is your 6, Anderson's your 8, Morgan's your 10. It's not that difficult, I don't think. And again, they're intelligent enough to move around and take up space when they need to as well. So I think having Morgan back this week was huge. But I think, again, people are overlooking what Anderson brings to the team and did so again against Ipswich.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with both of your points. I think having them both on the pitches, it's the way forward. It's funny, isn't it, with, Mark, I'm not criticising you for saying this, but you talk about number 10 and everyone talks about, false 9. It is funny in modern day football that you probably never, and maybe I sound old school here, but 20, 30 years ago, you would never have really heard that. Just a bit of a funny one, I guess, in general football. Right, let's look at Chris Wood before we talk about Forest women and a couple of other things before we go. Just what a penalty from him in confidence. He's now he is now, correct me if I'm wrong, the joint top goal scorer at Forest.
Premier League goals, 24 alongside Brian Roy,
Absolutely. So just great for him to match that stat and that accolade, and what a penalty from him. Holly, I know we talked about it a little bit early, but you just have every faith when Chris Wood plays for Forest, and at the minute, if he gets a chance, if he gets a Chris Wood chance, you just have every faith it's going to end up in the back of the net, don't you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know it's a massive cliche, but confidence is such a big thing in football, and he's absolutely brimming with it at the moment, isn't he? He can't stop scoring, and proved us all wrong, hasn't he? I mean, who would have thought? And I love that, he's... I mean, I am old enough to remember Brian Roy and enjoyed those times back in the mid-90s, but I love that we have a player like Chris Wood, and he's probably, he is going to break the record, isn't he? Let's face it. And I love that fact. I love that we're in the Premier League. We've got a wonderful striker, lovely bloke, great footballer, very clever footballer as well. Because when we bought him, we thought he was just going to be a big lump of a target man, didn't we? But he's actually completely proved a lot of us wrong. Thinking about that beautiful deft header that he had against Palace last season. The game against Newcastle away, particularly, lives long in the memory. So, fantastic. And he can only get, can he get better? Yeah. I mean, he's going to keep scoring, isn't he? So he's going to smash that record. And, brilliant penalty. I mean, this is a good point, actually, about this. So when you've got a keeper like Muric who's so tall, do you think that's your only option, really, is just to bang it down the middle rather than kind of opt for either side? Because the likelihood is, considering his height, that he probably will save it. I don't know. I was thinking about this earlier, whether that's a general sort of rule of thumb, really, with those kind of keepers. But I was thinking back to Pantilimon. Do you remember? He was probably the tallest keeper that I can remember, and obviously he wasn't particularly good for Forest, though, wasn't he? But I can't really remember any particular penalties that he saved. But it's always a bit of an interesting, wasn't it, when you bang it down the middle, because you could potentially save it with your feet, but maybe the sheer force of that ball, just no one was ever going to save it, were they? I don't think. But
no, absolutely, the power of that, and also I thought Muric had a really good game. I mean, where was that Muric when he played for Forest? He was awful. He was absolutely awful when he played for Forest. I can remember that that opening game with I think that was against like a Bournemouth or something, and he made that awful mistake. Don't get me started on Muric. Right, I think let's move on. Let's talk about City on Wednesday night before we talk about Forest women. Obviously, Man City constantly losing at the minute. Great to see. Holly, it is a big game on Wednesday, but I say that in terms of not obviously pressure on Forest at all, but big game on Wednesday in terms of the media, the national media will be talking about it. It's all focus on Forest, Man City, and there is that pressure on Man City. Forest can use that massively. I suppose it can go both ways, can't it? But Forest can use that pressure and almost utilise it to just rock up, no pressure on us. We try and do what we did against Liverpool, against Chelsea, against Leicester, just to name a few. And, let's see what happens.
Yeah, I think the pressure's off, really. I mean, people say like free hit and all that kind of thing, but who would have thought we'd be in this position? Normally we'd be going like completely in fear of rocking up to the Etihad, considering our past two seasons. I mean, if we lose, we lose. I'm not too concerned if we lose, but I'm genuinely feeling quite excited for this one, and I think we can come away with a point. I mean, they have to win, don't they? They need to be getting back on track. I mean, it's not like Pep's job is in jeopardy or anything like that, but they do need to get their season back on track. So I would bite your hand off for a 1-1 draw at the moment. But it doesn't. If we lose, we lose. I don't think it's going to be of any consequence. We're still going to be in the top half of the table. So,
Mark, what's your take on the game? Should Forest try something? Obviously, difficult to replicate because football's football and it changes every game and everything like that. But should Forest replicate what they did against Liverpool in terms of the starting formation and tactically, or do you think Nuno will try and maybe plan something a little bit different?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, what a bizarre position for Forest to be in, favourites going into this game.
Yeah, 1 point behind them as well.
I mean, seriously, like that's a bit of a ridiculous thing to say out loud. I mean, we're playing against the champions of England. The quality of their team is insane. We're not really favourites, but given their current unprecedented run of form, we kind of sort of are. Yeah, it is. It's very bizarre. And so that being said, honestly, I wouldn't hate seeing Nuno putting out exactly the same team and going about our business in more or less the same kind of way. I don't really want to see us do what we did against Liverpool. I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. I just think it's unnecessary. I think there's blood in the water. City are there to be got at. Could they turn us over and we end up getting hammered 3-0? Absolutely. That could happen. Somebody is going to get a beating from City at some point here in the near future. But I think Forest are capable of getting something out of this game. I agree with Holly. Getting a point would be great. But honestly, I think a win is there to be won. So let's go get it.
Yeah, let's go get it. Right.
6 points, actually. 6 points out of Manchester here in the next week.
Yeah, 6 points. 6 points. Yeah, I was going to say 6 points in Manchester. I might as well wear my Forest shirt 24/7 down to the.
So what would you? So here's what I think. Here's what I think is the most likely outcome: beat City, lose to United. So would you guys rather that? Obviously, that's 3 points in that scenario, or 2 draws.
I think. See, I'd rather play on that, and I'd rather go Forest to lose on Wednesday to City, because the story won't be Forest have lost. It'll be the story that City have finally broken their bad form. So there's no pressure there again. And just because of my absolute hatred towards Manchester United, I want Forest to beat them on Saturday. Don't know what you think, Holly.
Yeah, that's a really good one. My heart is saying safety and getting 2 points from those 2 games. But yeah, I would love for us to beat Man U at Old Trafford. Yeah. That would be a bit of a nice little scalp.
You're just dreaming, aren't you, Holly, as you say that?
Let's just say I was, because do you know what was coming into my head was like all of the insufferable Man United fans that I had to go to school with in the 90s, being a Forest fan, although obviously we were decent at that point, but still. And I do have a little laugh to myself sometimes about their sort of dip in form, shall we say.
Absolutely. Although they seem that they think they're gonna win the league with Amorim now. We'll see by the end of the season. Right, let's talk Forest women and a great result. Holly, you do the Forest women podcast, just recently set up as well. Great work on that, but great win yesterday for them in the FA Cup. It was 19-0. You were there?
I was,
Yeah.
It was.
What was it like?
She got on in the second half by the sounds of things.
Sub myself on. Yeah, do you know what? It was how I remember football used to be. It was a classic game of football. No, it wasn't classic at all. What am I talking about? A classic in terms of the setting and the occasion and the opposition, sort of minnows against big boys sort of thing. So it was kind of, how should we put it? So they're 3 tiers below us. So it was kind of like Forest men playing Boston United or someone like that. So there was a massive gulf. Like I would consider them, how should we say, a grassroots sort of non-league side playing a professional outfit. So of course there is a massive gulf of class there. But you can only, players in front of you, and we scored 19 goals. Bridget Galloway and Freya Thomas scored 5 each, which was nice. And we go on to the next round, which is next week against Burnley at home at Grange Park. They're in the same league as us, so that's going to be a real test for us. But I'd love to see us go on a little FA Cup run. We're doing really well in the league, going for promotion. If we could also have a little FA Cup run as well, that would be really, really nice. So fingers crossed.
Yes, good stuff. And as always, anyone that listens to Garibaldi Red, there's great Forest content out there, as we all know, and especially Holly's podcast, Forest Women podcast. Mark, you got something to say?
Yeah, excuse me, sir. I have my hand up here. And I know you're in university, so you're conditioned to this. So I stuck my hand up to get your attention. So, Holly, I got to ask you. So, obviously, you and I were both pally with Andy Cook. You mentioned at the top of this podcast that we had the privilege of visiting with him a couple of times on another podcast that you and I worked on together. And we saw fairly up close what he was doing with that team and the kind of success that they were having. And I think we were both impressed by that. So it was a concern when he left, but Forest don't seem to have skipped a beat. In fact, they've taken it to a whole other level. So talk a little bit about the new coach, if you would, and what she's done to really elevate this team and continue on Cook's work.
Yeah, I mean, massive shoes to fill, right? Andy, props to Andy. He did a fantastic job with Forest Women, and left to go and coach Newcastle, which were his, he was based in the Northeast, so that was fairly understandable why he moved away. Carly, I mean, what can I say? She's fantastic. She's been a breath of fresh air. I love the style of football that she's playing. She's really front-footed. She's really dynamic. Very progressive, very, very high standards, asks a lot of her team and wants to play football the right way, in the Forest way. And I think it's a brand of football that's really easy on the eye. And do you know what is brilliant as well? What I love about her is that her and Amber have had this vision for the team, obviously with Marinakis putting the money into the team and going for promotion and trying to get us essentially ultimately into the Women's Super League, which I cannot wait for if that happens. I really, really hope it does. And what I love is that they've got this blueprint, they've got a plan, and they've managed to bring in some fantastic players in the summer, like really, really key signings, really marquee signings that have really stood out, and they mean business. And they've so far executed the plan really well. So I think we're really lucky to have her. I think she's a really, really impressive young manager, and she's just signed another 3-year deal as well. So she's going to be with us for a little bit longer. So that's really good to see. And I just want to say, I hope she's doing okay, because I know she's having a little bit of a personal issue at the moment. She's not actually in the dugout for the next few games. She's having a bit of time out. So thinking of Carly and looking forward to seeing her back with us. Hopefully for the Wolves game, I think it might be. I don't know. I have no idea when it's going to be.
And that's obviously a huge game. So. Yeah, that's a huge game as well.
Yes, so, that's a massive game. That's a good point. That is an absolutely massive game. Pretty much, if we win that, we haven't obviously won the league, but it's a massive 6-pointer. They're a point behind us. It's huge, absolutely huge. So I want to try and get as many people, well, not just me, we'll try and get as many people into the City Ground for that one on the 5th of January.
All right. And then one other quick follow-up question while I have you on, because it's the timing of this is just too perfect. With me being in the US, obviously the Lionesses, I know you're a big fan like I am, and the Lionesses just played US women's national team to a 0-0 draw at Wembley. What was your take on that match?
Yeah, I was there actually.
Look at me.
Well, I had to make the decision. The really, really tough decision is between Forest or the Lionesses, and I only had to do that one at a time when we were in the quarterfinal. That's when we played. I
remember
Arsenal, I think, and we were playing Colombia, I think, in the quarterfinal. Anyway, it wasn't the most exciting of games. I mean, it was in terms of, it was a bit of a stalemate sort of chess match, really. I think Serena had a set up to not lose, and we didn't really have a lot going on up top, really. There wasn't a lot of attacking threat. The US have got some of their best players were out. Same for us. Like, we didn't have Lauren Hemp, Lauren James, etc. So, but no, it was. Do you know what? It was a fantastic spectacle, and it was great to see. I think it was 79,000 on the day in the stadium, which was fantastic, and it was a great atmosphere. And
I think it was north of 80 actually.
Yeah, possibly.
I think they
called. Did they call? I think it was 79 in the stadium, but it possibly could be more.
But either way, that's amazing.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, and it's great to see. I mean, I personally would have loved to have had Emma Hayes as the Lionesses manager. Obviously, it didn't work out timings-wise with Serena, but it's good to see her back. And I think she's the best in the world, love her or not. I think she's a great coach. So, yeah, it was
absolutely.
Really good.
No, some good points, Holly. Appreciate it as always. And I just think it's great to see women's football coming. I mean, just I kind of look back to the Euros and just everything like that when it was obviously held in the UK. Just thought it was brilliant. And long may it continue. And obviously Forest women flying at the minute. Great win at the weekend. So good stuff. And as mentioned, check out Holly's podcast. Really good, especially if you want to get your Forest women's football fix. I have been following it a little bit recently. Not getting to the games and things, so it's been good. Right, both really enjoyed that. Thanks very much. Mark, appreciate it as always, mate.
Yep, cheers, fella. And it's great to be on with you again, Holly. Really fun to see you, mate.
You too, mate.
And great debut, Holly. We hope to have you back soon.
Oh, my pleasure, Max. Thanks for having me on.
No, you're welcome. It's been nice today. I've been at uni all day, the life of a journalism student, covering a story on assisted dying, and that bill being obviously talked about massively in the UK last week. So nice to talk about Forest for once. Nice to talk about Forest tonight after a bit of a depressing subject all day. So there we go. We'll be back with quite a few episodes this week, given the City game midweek. We should be back Wednesday night for a late one, or Thursday morning with Aussie Dave, all being well. Then we'll preview the game for Man U, then we'll review the game of that, of course, about this time next week or next Sunday. So lots of episodes. Keep your eyes peeled on social media. As always, we've got a few little bits and pieces coming out in the next few weeks. Kudos to Forest, as well as mentioned, with Warriors United and Marinakis. They're doing great work. They've done some good stuff with Footprints, the charity that I'm involved with too, and they continue to do so. So big up to Forest. It's great to see that at the minute. Right, that does us nicely. Give us a like, share and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us across Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Forest went into Fulham on the 2nd of April last season on 22 points. Fast forward to Monday, the 2nd of December. Forest are already on those 22 points, albeit given 8 points deduction. A fantastic penalty from Chris Wood, and Forest sits 6th in the Premier League in the start of December. You would have never have thought that a year ago, would you? From all of us at Garibaldi Red, have a good one. Bye-bye.